In 1997, Turok 1 launched as the first FPS on the Nintendo 64. It didn't reinvent the genre, and instead took the core gameplay tenets from Doom and Quake and translated them to the console for a new audience. While it certainly carved an identity of its own, Turok wore its inspiration on its sleeve, owing its structure and gameplay design to its PC predecessors. But while the FPS genre was still finding its legs in the console realm, it was about to undergo a revolution on the PC side. A month before Turok 2 would launch, a little game called Half-Life would come out. And much like the id Software games that came out before Turok 1, Half-Life would become the blueprint for Turok 3. The term Half-Like is thrown around to describe the slew of games that came out in the early 2000s that were clearly inspired by Valve's groundbreaking title. They are sort of seen as the next step in evolution of the FPS genre, as boomer shooters began fading out of relevance, which, to be clear, isn't a condemnation of boomer shooters. One subgenre isn't any better than the other. It's all personal preference at the end of the day. But there's no denying that the industry was clearly leaning in the direction of linear, slower, story-focused shooters, and even the likes of Doom itself attempted to follow suit, to a, well, bit of a spicy reception. One side note here, I used the term boomer shooter in my last two Turok videos, and some people seem to be confused by it. Boomer shooter is a term that's popped up recently. It just kind of refers to any shooter that employs the core tenets of old 90s shooters. Fast movement, accurate hip fire, dodging projectiles as opposed to taking cover, minimal story and maximum action, that sort of thing. You guys know the games I'm talking about. Your Serious Sams, your Painkillers. They could be oldies like Blood or brand new like Dusk. I think the boomer part of the term is just like how Gen Z uses boomer to describe anyone older than them. It's not actually talking about the boomer generation. And while we're defining vague terms, Half-Like is an even less concrete term. But in principle, a Half-Like would be a game that emphasizes linearity, cohesive grounded level design, scripted cinematic in-game events, and minimizing the amount of time that it takes control away from the player. The first Half-Life had you battle throughout a top-secret military facility from area to area with no cutscenes to break up the pacing. If you had to get from point A to point B, there wasn't a conveniently placed jump pad and a series of random floating platforms to get you there. Everything you had to traverse, climb over, and jump to felt like it belonged in the environment. This allowed the level designers to flex their creativity in making the game feel like a journey, as opposed to just a level. And that's the state of the industry when Turok 3 began development. The whole structure of the first two games, with their disconnected levels linked together by this ethereal hub area, it was suddenly no longer in vogue. Nor was the disjointed storytelling. So Acclaim decided to adapt the Turok franchise to this brave new world of FPSs. And thus, we got Turok 3. But before we deep dive into Turok 3, I just want to take a step back and say, hey, what's up? I'm Zach, and I like getting all the achievements in old, weird, or obscure games. Turok definitely fits the old category, though I'm of course playing the recent Nightdive remasters with achievement support. Originally I wanted to do one video just to cover the entire remastered trilogy, but it turns out I got a lot to say about each of these games. So I split this into 3 videos. Check out parts 1 and 2 if you haven't. Otherwise, let's jump right into Turok 3, Shadow of Oblivion. So right off the bat, we have the third iteration of the Iguana Entertainment intro. Turok 1 had the iguana scamper away, narrowly avoiding arrows. Turok 2 demonstrated that the jungles of the Lost Land do indeed have stand your ground laws. But Turok 3 is a much tonally darker game, and that's reflected in the iguana intro. grotesque organic font there, and then the sort of weird deformed fetus in the title screen, it's pretty clear the franchise has dropped all pretense of being about dinosaurs. Which, I mean, good. Personally, I think cosmic body horror creatures are much better antagonists. For the 100%, we're gonna need to do a total of 4 full playthroughs, which, I know, sounds exhausting, but it's really not for a couple reasons. The first reason is because the game is, well, it's short. Like, really short. As in, you can easily beat this game in under 2 hours. In fact, there's an achievement for beating it in under 1 hour and 20 minutes. And all of that might sound bad, but this game has a lot of replayability, but I'll talk about that in a second. So, difficulty. There is an achievement for beating the game on Oblivion difficulty, but for the first playthrough, I'm doing normal to get my bearings. So, I spent a lot of time in the Turok 2 video covering the story setup and sifting through all of these comics and strategy guides for every bit of lore that I could muster. Thankfully, Turok 3 is much better at communicating its plot though. The game opens with our protagonist from Turok 2, Joshua Fireseed, creeping through vents like John McClane. He attempts to rescue a child, potentially a small Victorian ghost child, from what seems to be a cell, but he's caught and killed by the Flesh Eaters. But don't worry, it's just a dream. They wouldn't kill off our old protagonist in the opening cutscene. That would be crazy, right? So Joshua is now older. It's not entirely clear how much time has passed, but he's clearly mellowed out from the college frat boy that he was in the Turok 2 comic line. Oh wait, what? He's only 24 here? Okay, no way he's changed this much in just a couple years. I think this definitively proves that the comics and the games are completely different and separate canons. He's moved in with his family, his younger brother Joseph, and his sister Danielle, who has just lost her husband in an unexplained tragedy. These days, Josh seems to just kind of brood and say freaky prophetic things from his dreams.
The child.
What?
The child is the key, Danielle.
I also just want to point out that this game has full facial animations and lip syncing, which, that's wild for the N64. We went from this to this in only 3 years. Later that night, Flesh Eaters invade the Turok household, partially to admire their chicken portrait, and also to kill the Fireseeds. Instead of just chopping Joshua up in his bed, this guy decides to slowly reach over to tickle him, allowing enough time for Joshua to rip his badass action line.
You're too loud.
But Joshua is wounded and does the classic, "leave me behind, I'll take as many with them as I can" shtick. And yeah. Oh, he actually does straight up die in the opening cutscene. I distinctly remember that pissing me off as a kid, but I don't really know why, since he had absolutely no characterization in Turok 2 anyway. There was really nothing to get attached to. So Danielle and Joseph escape, but then they're thwarted by the classic Turok low draw distance fog and don't see the hulking beast 10 feet in front of them. But thankfully, they are rescued by Adon, who is looking significantly more human this time around. She brings us to the Council of Voices, an ancient collective consciousness that once belonged to several great leaders of the Lost Land. They immortalize themselves through steel and circuitry, for the flesh is weak, and now act as the secretive rulers of the realm, using Adon as their corporeal representative. With Joshua dead, it's time to crown a new Turok, one who will take the fight to Oblivion. We get to choose who we will play as for this run, Danielle or Joseph. And the choice affects a number of things, as certain paths in the game are only available to certain characters. Danielle is a big, beautiful gigantus who swings around like George of the Jungle and jumps much higher than Joseph. Whereas Joseph is a manlet, so he can crawl through tiny spaces and focuses more on stealth and sticking to the shadows, which is why he also gets night vision and a silenced pistol. Yeah, you heard that right. Stealth, night vision, and silenced weapons in a Turok game. In case you didn't believe me when I said this was a bold new direction for the franchise. They also receive different weapon upgrades throughout the game. For example, both characters start out with the standard bow and arrow, but Joseph will eventually unlock the storm bow, which is a sort of automatic crossbow that doesn't need to be knocked and can zoom in, while Danielle gets the classic tech bow with powerful explosive tipped arrows. This is the same for every weapon. There's the standard version, but then there's also a variant for either character. So between the different weapons and traversal methods, this game actually does need multiple playthroughs to be fully appreciated, which is why I don't really mind the shortened length. Anyway, for my first playthrough, I went with Joseph, because girls have cooties. Sorry, this game came out in the year 2000, so I'm trying to put myself back in the headspace of like Millennium era Zach. Anyway, before we fully jump into level 1, let's do a quick achievement overview. Like I mentioned earlier, you need a minimum of 4 playthroughs to 100% this game, because there's an achievement for beating it with the 4 different characters. And yeah, that means there are 2 additional secret characters that you unlock after beating the game with both Danielle and Joseph. One is the main man Joshua himself, resurrected and ready to kick dick. And the other is a raptor. Yeah, you get to play through the whole game as a raptor. I'll talk about that later, it's a little weird. There are 2 collectible achievements to be aware of. One is for collecting 500 life force. That's the classic Turok brand Mario coins here. In the past games, collecting 100 of these would get you an extra life, but now since this is a half-life, a life system doesn't really make sense, so they just instead now raise your max HP. There are 500 life force tokens total in a playthrough, so this achievement means you need to collect all of them. However, because Joshua can take both Joseph and Danielle's paths through a level, he can actually obtain more than 500. So his run is probably the easiest one to get this achievement. The other collectible is, you guessed it, an OP power weapon that we need to assemble. This time it's a gun that shoots black holes, which sucks in enemies and then blows up. I'm sorry, I've been listening to too much Cumtown recently. I have the same complaint with this weapon as I do with Turok 2's nuke, which is that it's cool to mess around with, but rarely is it actually practical. It is very visually stunning, like the image warping from the gravity fluctuations is super trippy, but it just takes too long to kill anything to be really useful. There's another achievement for finding secrets, but thankfully this time around you only need to find 3 instead of all of them, like you did in Turok 1 and 2. So I'd recommend just using a guide for the life force tokens and weapon parts. You'll probably end up finding the 3 secrets on your own anyway. The bulk of the rest of the achievements are all situational or pertain to using a specific weapon, so I'll cover those when we get there. So immediately, this opening area is dripping with atmosphere. It's almost noir-like, rain-slicked urban streets, these police cruisers flying by and also flying into things. Something that a lot of people commented about in the Turok 2 video was how much the game scared them as a kid, which I definitely could relate to, don't get me wrong, but Turok 3 scared me a lot more. And now I remember why. This first level is really dark.
It's right up here! Hurry! We can get up to the
In fact, as we'll see, all of Turok 3 is really dark. Not that I'd describe the other games as lighthearted, but this game in particular is just tonally incredibly grim and disturbing, which, I mean, it's fitting given the antagonist. You have to break open this crate to get a key for a nearby door, which makes me wonder just how interactive other objects in the environment are. Could I break open this footlocker for more ammo, or can I burst this fire extinguisher? Oh, yep, okay. Noted. In fact, there's an achievement for killing someone by exploding a fire extinguisher, so good to know. Death has you reload at the beginning of the zone, which is Turok 3's way of breaking up levels so as not to overload the poor N64's RAM. It's identical to how Half-Life did it, with a new area having a little title pop up, except that they're way more frequent in Turok 3 due to the smaller memory pool of the console versus those beefy 90s gaming PCs. But regardless, I do kind of like this change. It allows the journey of Turok 3 to feel much more cohesive as you move from area to area, instead of the disconnected smorgasbord of levels you get in Turok 1 and 2. The level starts with you trying to find your way to the top of this skyscraper so that you can seal the breach up there, and you actually hoof it all around the city, avoiding police checkpoints and finding your way through back alleys and sewer tunnels to get there. It actually feels like you're embarking on a grand adventure as opposed to just teleporting in and out of various disjointed levels. The city streets are patrolled by Ed 209s and near-future police who certainly aren't afraid to turn off their body cams if, God forbid, you try to cross one of their barriers. So, between the ominous, rainy urban gloom, the overly hostile police force, and the demonic horrors that roam the alleys, this level, like, honestly, I wouldn't mind if the entire game took place here. This is a really cool environment. We end up having to make our way through a museum, utilizing Joseph's night vision to traverse an invisible laser security system. Not like lasers that trip the alarm, mind you, but lasers that straight up kill you. That is an insane security system for a city museum. Like, imagine that malfunctioning and going off during operating hours. Back on the city streets, we are now attacked by zombies. Not deadkin, like in Turok 2. No, don't go calling a Shadow Man. These guys are corpses that have been claimed by Oblivion, twisted and corrupted by its dark influence. So I guess I should take this opportunity to talk about our antagonist. So Turok 2's lore and antagonist was kind of batshit, right? If you haven't seen that video, a brief recap is that an ancient alien attempted time travel and instead ended up in a new reality and created the Big Bang, which kickstarted our universe. But before he arrived, in that reality, there was Oblivion. Okay, so this is where it gets a little nebulous, and you kind of have to do a little bit of interpretation. So the way I interpret the lore is that Oblivion is the personification of the void. Like, he is the incarnation of cosmic decay and entropy. Before the Big Bang created everything, Oblivion was everything. Or rather, it was nothing. And that's how Oblivion likes it. So, Oblivion is trying to revert the universe back to nothing, as that is the natural state of things. Which is why Oblivion has the power to taint and corrupt the dead and dying, because the more something decays, the more power it has over it. Which brings us to why it is hunting down the Turok line. One of Turok's iconic tools is called the Light Burden. It appears as an unassuming leather satchel, but is actually an infinitely vast vessel capable of storing any and everything. I liken it to a bag of holding in D&D, but the reason for its magical power is because inside of the Light Burden is a fragment of the Big Bang itself. And seeing as the Big Bang was what ruined Oblivion's whole dimension of nothingness by introducing, well, stuff, it makes sense why it would want to destroy the Light Burden. So yeah, they decided to top the previous antagonist, which was a multi-billion-year-old psychic alien demigod, by making Turok 3's antagonist an even older entity that is the personification of nothingness. This is the part where I once again point to Turok 2008 and go, why the fuck did they decide to reboot such a cool premise all for just a boring generic military shooter? Anyway, like all FPSs, there's a lame sewer section, and then like all good FPSs, there's a cool train sequence. Finally, you get to the top of the skyscraper and watch a police chopper get warped by Oblivion into a twisted, hulking monster, who is also our first boss. Fighting it on the upper area, all you really need to do is strafe and shoot, but if you run out of ammo, you can drop down to the lower area to stock up. Health spawns around here too, thankfully. After defeating the gunship, you jump into the portal, only to find yourself in a top-secret military base. One that's, it's isolated in the mountains, it's overrun with otherworldly alien-like creatures and hostile special forces. And there's also lab coat wearing scientists that are running around panicking through all this. Yeah, you may have thought I was being too harsh calling this game a Half-like, but come on, this is bordering on plagiarism. The soldiers are even wearing the same type of camo as the Heku soldiers from Half-Life. Nightdive Studios System Shock 2 Remaster. Available now. I should mention too that this game has a very generous aim assist system that is turned on by default. Usually for mouse and keyboard games, I would instantly turn it off, but I don't know, I really didn't mind it in this game. That is, until Oblivion difficulty. Occasionally the auto-aim would mess up and I'd miss my shots, especially with the non-hit scan weapons like the bow, which those extra few seconds can mean the difference between life and death in Oblivion difficulty, so I turned it off there. With aim assist on, it also made headshots much harder since the aim assist pulls your crosshair towards center mass, so I would recommend at least temporarily turning it off here, since there's a dude who stands right next to a fire extinguisher in this hallway, and blasting him gets you that achievement. But with aim assist on, you'd probably just end up shooting him instead. There's a whole section where you have to go through these pitch black hangars, and the game introduces a new enemy type. But it's kind of dumb because you can barely make out anything past their silhouette since you're in thermal vision. These guys are glass cannons though. A single arrow puts them down, but if they land an attack on you, especially in Oblivion difficulty, I mean that could easily be half your health gone in an instant. Apparently these enemies are called Wallagusses? Wallagusses? And they're the result of some sort of top secret gene splicing program that combined amphibian and mammal DNA. The result is very Lovecraftian, which is neat, but also, I don't know, I guess I just don't really understand what this has to do with Oblivion. These guys are just escaped mutant experiments, right? So why are we here? What's the point of being in this military base? We just got spat out of here from that portal, but why? Well, don't worry, we'll get our non-answer in a second. The boss of level 2 is a crab-octopus hybrid called the Ziphius, which is actually just the genus for swordfish. I don't really know why they chose that name, but you'll never guess where his weak spot is. After popping his eye, we drop a submarine on his head and then swim into an underground tunnel to end up here, where Adon explains the significance of this place. This strange ancient statue of a child apparently holds a trace of the origin signature, which, from what I gather, is the same sort of fragment of the Big Bang that's found in the light burden. So it seems Oblivion was homing in on this base with its portal because it thought the energy from this statue might have been a Turok with the light burden. But it wasn't. It was just a statue. And this information is accepted without question, and our heroes then just go into a nearby portal to the next level. No one bothers to explain why a statue of a child is housing a fragment of the fucking Big Bang, or who built the statue, or why said statue was at a top secret military base where they're splicing animal genes together to create Lovecraftian abominations. Like, what? They don't even do anything with the Big Bang fragment, they just leave it there. There must have been some cut content here because I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. Well, anyway, level 3 finally takes us off of Earth and into the Lost Land. Lost Land is frequently described as an intergalactic sewer, just all of the waste seems to funnel into it from different realities. And this level takes that metaphor literally, because this is an industrial, polluted junkyard filled with mutated junkies and sewer mutants. And God, do I love it. It feels very grunge and metallic, and it kind of reminds me of how every 80s action movie needed to have a big fight scene in some sort of industrial construction site or junkyard. Some of the basic enemies here have oxygen tanks on their back. Shooting one and having it explode gives you an achievement, which within like the span of 30 seconds I managed to blow up 3 of them by accident, so this isn't a particularly hard achievement. Since we're in the Lost Land now, dinosaurs are back on the menu, and there's an achievement for killing 30 raptors. It's almost impossible not to get this across your 4 runs though, so don't sweat it. In a very cool reminder that the Lost Land is constantly pulling in all sorts of things from different worlds and times, a World War I German biplane just comes out of nowhere and smashes a hole in this dam that allows you to pass through. We get the vampire gun here too, which isn't particularly useful on this playthrough, but it will be a godsend for Oblivion difficulty, as it completely paralyzes and leeches health from enemies. The only downside being if you miss, it damages you, so you gotta be a little careful with it. The boss of level 3 is this creature called the Opisthor? It pops out from these little pools, and you just have to damage it enough for it to go back under the surface to heal, and then hit the nearby switch to seal that pool. Do that 4 times and then it'll fight you for real, in which case you can just clap its cheeks. It's not a hard boss. Once it's dead, we just hop right down its hole. That sounded weird. Once it's dead, we just drop down into its lair, which leads us into level 4. Level 4 is, wait a second. I know this place anywhere. And then there's the... This is a 1-for-1 recreation of Jungle from GoldenEye 64. No, but for real, this is such a great throwback. If you watched my video on Turok 1, you know just how much that game means to me on a personal level, and it's weird because this game only came out like 3 years after Turok 1, so I don't think this moment probably struck a big chord for the people playing these games at release. But for me, I actually never got this far into Turok 3 back in the day, so this actually took me by surprise. 3 years ain't enough to build nostalgia, but the 25 years between me playing Turok 1 for the first time and me getting to this part of Turok 3, that's a lot of nostalgia this place just uncorked. This was really kind of a wild experience. I had no idea this was in the game. They even put the secret climbable wall here. Oh my god, I love it. Ugh. Anyway, nostalgia aside, this level is also really good. After the Turok 1 member berry there, we get a short cutscene where a disembodied voice tells Adon that Joshua can be saved. Which I don't think I mentioned in the previous video, but Adon and Joshua are pretty clearly in love with each other in the lore, but can never be together because of their respective duties as speaker for the Council of Voices and then Joshua's duty as, Turok. The Council of Voices also are seen discussing her in an ominous way and seem to be serving some ulterior motive, but it's unclear at this point what that might be. But the rest of the level focuses around following this rushing river downstream with various checkpoint dams blocking your way. The level is really great. There's just something so comforting about being back in the jungle, blasting futuristic bald-headed mercs with some weird Stone Age cult temples around. In fact, I gotta say, every level so far has been really good. The environments, the enemies, it'd be really tough for me to pick out a favorite. Which, if it isn't clear, the reason that I'm pointing this out now is because that's about to change. Towards the final checkpoint gate, there are these freaky undead voodoo priests with exposed spines and no flesh or tissue on their skulls at all, and this weird necromancer guy who will continuously spawn more until you can kill him. The boss here is this warlord who's like twice the size of you, which, I guess to be fair, I'm playing as a manlet, so he's probably only like 5'10". But he's also immortal and just shrugs off your shots. Turns out you need to lure him over this grate and drop him onto the kebab spike below. After fighting our way through one more merc outpost, we find our way into the lava layer of the Fireborn. And this level is by and large the weakest of the game. The Fireborn are these lava dinosaurs from Turok 2. They were basically just dinozoids, but reskinned to be fire-themed, but people seem to latch onto them for some reason, and they were used a lot in the marketing. This level is bad. It's not nearly as bad as the worst levels of Turok 1 or 2. It's not a labyrinth, and it's not a big level, but it is hard to tell where you're going since everything looks identical. I got lost and ended up losing like 20 minutes trying to find where I needed to go, and I still managed to get lost on subsequent playthroughs too. But again, still not nearly as bad as Lair of the Blind Ones or the Catacombs. The boss here is the Alpha Fireborn, and this boss, he also kind of sucks. He can be kind of tedious. He dives under the lava to heal, at which point you should blast this stalactite looking thing which drops indiscriminate goo down, and it hardens the lava so that he can't retreat and heal. Problem is, enemies will continuously spawn and try to destroy this goo mound, which will remelt the lava. So you need to be diligent in killing them while also focusing on the boss. It's pretty annoying too, since when you're trying to defend the goo mound, if you miss and accidentally hit it, you'll end up breaking it yourself instead, so sometimes enemies would just stop spawning after a while, but I'm not sure if that was intentional or a glitch, so I wouldn't rely on that strategy. The final level is here in the Lair of Oblivion. If you remember from the hijacked portals in Turok 2, they would all send you to an ambush in some sort of industrial refinery. Well, now, you're in the heart of that refinery. If you stay in this opening cave hallway, a seemingly never-ending horde of flesh eaters will keep spilling out from around the corner, so it's here that I started to farm a bunch of achievements. I drained 200 points of health with the vampire gun, killed 3 enemies at once with the napalm cannon, and 2 enemies at once with the razor wind. I killed 10 enemies by bouncing shots with the shredder, blew off 300 limbs, killed 25 enemies with melee, and then 20 cerebral boar kills too. Joseph's exclusive upgrade to the cerebral boar allows you to possess an enemy, and then have them suicide bomb other enemies. But there's an achievement for forcing them to kill themselves with the environment, and there just so happens to be a lava pit right nearby. Anytime enemies stopped spawning while I was farming these achievements, I just hopped into that lava pit to kill myself so that I could reload the checkpoint. At certain points throughout this level, there are these little side paths that you can follow that lead you to Oblivion ore refineries. Destroy both of these for an achievement, but even if you're not going for achievements, you should do it anyway, because it will also make the final boss have less overall health. Why? I don't know. I can't really find an explanation for this. Oblivion seems to be intertwined with mining and ore refineries since its introduction in Turok 2, and to my knowledge, that isn't explained anywhere. Online, comics, manual, strategy guide, nothing. There's nothing that describes the connection between Oblivion and this special ore. It just seems kind of weird to have a character that is so ancient and powerful and eldritch, but also still relies on industrial technology. Anyway, in one of those refineries, you will finally find your last PSG part. That's the black hole power weapon we have to assemble. And there's an achievement for killing 4 enemies with a single shot that you can get in this area. We finally reached the child that Joshua was always dreaming of, and... Let me rephrase that. We finally reached the child of Joshua's dreams. You know what I mean. But it turns out to be a trap. The boss fight with Oblivion can be a little confusing. Basic logic says that weird purple orb appendage is his weak spot, and yet there's no visual feedback of any kind to indicate this. It doesn't hurt him, there's no special particle effects to signify it's any more vulnerable than the other parts of his body. That being said, it does seem to be vulnerable when he uses it to attack. So if you wait for him to attack and then blast his little orb arm, he'll get stunned, and then you can just unload onto his chest. God damn it. I meant like in his mouth, like his chest mouth, the fucking mouth. If you didn't destroy the refineries, each one left operational is 1 more health bar he gets, so it's definitely worth seeking those out. The PSG will also instantly stun him too, so if you have that, this boss fight is kind of a piece of cake. Defeating him, he will revert to a little larva that escapes, and after 1 more short area, you're reunited with Joshua. And even though, like, 5 minutes ago, you watched Oblivion disguise itself as a child in order to trap you, you fucking fall for it again.
Joshua?
If you hear that, you kill your brother. Darkness upon you, little Turok.
The suns and stone will fall this day!
Oh my god, I think I finally realized what that voice reminds me of.
Through you, I am born. I am the master of death.
Man, I should make a video on the darkness. Anyway, this last boss fight against Josh is as straightforward as possible. There's no gimmicks, there's no weak spots, just blast his health down faster than he can blast yours. Using their light burdens, which I guess there are 2 of now, Joseph and Danielle use the fragment of this universe's very creation to extinguish Oblivion once and for all. It turns out the child that Joshua was dreaming about was actually his unborn nephew, as Danielle reveals that she is pregnant, thus furthering the Turok lineage. And then, for the 3rd time in this game, Josh dies.
No, Josh, please don't go.
Or does he? After the credits, there's a short cutscene where Adon expresses that she thinks she can bring Joshua back, but the council refuses to allow her any reprieve of duty, so she abdicates her position as speaker and this shadowy figure who is definitely not Adon's character model that's just retextured to be all black, schemes with the council to stop her. This is a cliffhanger that ultimately never pans out, unfortunately. The next Turok game, Turok Evolution, acts as a sort of soft reboot and prequel to Turok 1, and then the franchise functionally died after that as Acclaim went bankrupt in 2004. So we'll never know who Yvree is, or what the motive for the Council of Voices is, or if Joshua truly stays dead. Or will we? Alright, first playthrough down, where does that leave us on achievements? I still need to do a Danielle playthrough, so I decided to do that one on Oblivion difficulty, while also hunting down all of the Life Force tokens. Oblivion difficulty was surprisingly really easy, at least compared to hardcore on Turok 2. I had little to no issues here. Danielle's shotgun upgrade, which lets it light people on fire, can carry you through pretty much every area, aside from the Fireborn zones of course, and you should abuse it anyway since there's an achievement for lighting 30 enemies on fire with it. Anytime I'd get low on health, I'd just isolate an enemy and suck out his juices with the vampire gun to heal. And while there isn't a save system like Turok 2 that you can abuse, death just puts you back at the beginning of the zone, and thank God for the Nintendo 64's relative lack of RAM, because that means you're hitting a new zone every 5 minutes anyway. During this playthrough, I got 2 more cumulative achievements, that's 150 explosive kills and 30 raptor kills, before eventually finishing out the playthrough. Easy peasy. I only died 6 more times on this difficulty than I did on my first normal playthrough. So in the original N64 release, if you beat the game on Oblivion difficulty without dying, you'd be rewarded with a cheat to play as Joshua Fireseed, who basically had the abilities and weapons of both Joseph and Danielle. But doing that, that's an insane feat. And back in the day, it sounds like the exact sort of lie some kid would make up at school and tell everyone, and we just wouldn't really be able to refute him. But it's true. Allegedly, anyway. I mean, I've never done it. But thankfully in the remaster, all you need to do is beat the game with both characters. Not even on Oblivion difficulty, you can do it on easy, and that'll unlock both Joshua and a 4th secret character, a raptor. So there's an achievement for beating the game as the raptor, and also one for finishing the game in under 1 hour and 20 minutes. And since the raptor has increased speed, I decided that would be my next playthrough. The raptor is fucking weird, man, because you're restricted as to what weapons you can use. You get his talons as melee weapon, which makes perfect sense, but then you also get the razor wind and the... They just retextured the hand to be scaly. I don't know why that's so off-putting. Playing on easy to maximize the speedrun, the part where you have to dip and dodge the museum laser system was funny because the lasers only do like 1 damage on this difficulty, so I just straight up ran through that entire level in like 15 seconds. Most enemies can be outright avoided, and those that can't, like bosses for example, they get absolutely shredded by the razor wind. You'll also be able to use the grenade launcher and the cerebral bore along with all of their variants, so just keep moving and you should have a decent idea where to go since this is your 3rd playthrough now, and the run will be over before you know it. I clocked in this run at 1 hour and 8 minutes, and that's including getting lost in the goddamn fire area again. Alright, so 1 more playthrough to go. No other achievements left, so I just slapped it on easy and enjoyed one final ride as Joshua, resurrected from the grave. Which is clearly what was going to happen before Acclaim went under. Turok 4 probably would have handled Adon finding a way to bring back Joshua, and frankly, I'm here for it. He's a lot less annoying than his comic book counterpart. But yeah, that's it. That's Turok 3, Shadow of Oblivion, 100%, along with both Turok 1 and Turok 2. And I gotta say, Fireborn area notwithstanding, there wasn't a bad sequence in this game. Even down to the individual zones, they all felt very tightly crafted and kept the game interesting. The pacing is great. Each zone felt like its own little fully fleshed out level that plays into a larger narrative. The game is very much a Half-like, but it's a really, really good one. I'm actually surprised. I remember liking this one the least as a kid. If I had to rank them, Turok 1 would still be in top place, because if you watch that video, you know I'm incredibly biased towards it. But Turok 3 would definitely be in second. It's incredible how they nailed a completely different subgenre of shooter on their first try, while still having it feel like a Turok game. The identity is still very much intact. And then Turok 2 in third place. It's still a great game and a nice refinement of the formula from 1, but didn't do enough to set itself apart. Also, Lair of the Blind One sucks. Fuck that level. That being said, even in last place, Turok 2 is still like an 8 out of 10 in my book. There are no bad Turok games. Well, not on the N64 anyway. And on that note, I just want to take the last part of the video to talk about what happened with this franchise after the Nintendo 64. I only briefly mentioned it in the past videos, but there was also a game called Rage Wars, but that game was multiplayer. But that game was a multiplayer-focused, like, arena shooter, so I kind of consider that more of a spin-off. There were also a bunch of Game Boy games, one for each mainline release, including Rage Wars. They actually kind of ruled. They obviously weren't FPSs, but instead side-scrollers, and they were really, really hard. At least they were to me as a kid. But, like, for Game Boy quote-unquote ports, they were genuinely a lot of fun. After Turok 3, the franchise took the leap into the next generation with Turok Evolution. Just like the other games, I loved this title at the time, and I didn't actually know until I was an adult that it got a pretty mixed reception. I loved it for the same reasons I loved the rest of the games: the over-the-top gore, the wild, crazy weapons, and just the overall insanity of the enemy variety and environment designs. Evolution has yet to get the nightdive remaster treatment, but if it ever does, I'll be buying it day one. I could technically still cover this game on my channel, and even still do a 100% of the game through the Retro Achievements program, so let me know in the comments if you'd like to see that. After Evolution, Acclaim went under, and the rights to Turok ended up in the hands of probably the worst possible IP holders for the series: Disney. Specifically, the short-lived game label Touchstone Games. Turok 2008 is really... Alright, I try not to be too negative on this channel, as one man's trash is another man's treasure, right? I see a lot of people in the Turok subreddit who are really nostalgic for this game, and frankly, more power to them. I was beyond hyped to hear Turok was being revived for the next generation of consoles, and then it finally came out. In my Turok 1 video, I made a joke about how if you had never played one of the games, it'd be easy to look at the cover art and the title and think the entire game was just about shooting random dinosaurs in the jungle. But the actual game is so much more than that underneath the surface. Well, Turok 2008 seems like it was developed by the exact fictional person from that joke. There's no lost land, there's no voodoo priests or aliens or cyborgs, mutants. There's no primordial badlands or techno fortresses or sci-fi Hellenic port cities. No comically violent arsenal of ridiculous weaponry. No, just a 7th gen military shooter where half the time you shoot faceless generic mercenaries and the other half dinosaurs. It's just hashtag not my Turok. They went through the effort of having cool pre-canned knife execution animations, but there isn't even any fucking blood. How can you have a Turok game without obscene amounts of gore? Disney sucks, man. I really can't put the blame on the developers because, my personal gripes aside, it's a perfectly fine, albeit bland in my opinion, shooter. But that being said, I would be willing to give it another go, as it has been, what has it been, 17 years since I last played the game? Maybe looking at it with a more matured perspective would change my mind a little. I don't know, what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Turok 2008 did sell well enough to warrant production on a sequel, but that never came to fruition, as Disney shut down the developers after only putting out their second game, which was Tron Evolution. And if memory serves, that game was actually surprisingly good, so I really can't put the blame on the developers. After that, Turok went through IP hell and lay dormant for a decade before being dredged up for a small, cutesy indie game in 2019. I don't even need to share my thoughts on this, you already know what I'm going to say. For what it's worth, the game was only made because it won a small-scale game jam contest, so again, no shade to the developers. But at the same time, my excitement when I saw the headline for a new Turok game in 2019 was shattered, to say the least, when I clicked on it and saw the art. That sent me into a slight depression. And that brings us to the recent announcement of Turok Origins. On the day of the 2024 Game Awards, someone in my work group chat asked me what would be a dream announcement that they could make during the show. And I kid you not, even though the franchise has been dead and buried for 16 years at that point, I said I wanted to see a new Turok game. And I fear in that moment, the monkey's paw curled. So the first 30 seconds of that trailer, I just thought it was for Arc 2, and when the camera panned up, we were going to see Vin Diesel's face. But then the Native American face paint made it all click together, and I was immediately overcome with a cocktail of emotions, and unfortunately, most of them were negative. Let's get the obvious stuff out of the way. I hate the weird sci-fi spandex suits, I dislike the fact that it's third person, I'm worried since the only enemies we saw were dinosaurs, see my Turok 2008 complaint, and I hate that all of the weapons shown seem to be like energy weapons instead of meaty ballistic weapons. In fact, I didn't like anything in that trailer. But this is Saber Interactive, and the gameplay looks to be built on the bones of Space Marine 2, which, if you haven't seen my video on, suffice to say, yeah, I'm a bit of a fan of that game, to put it lightly. The trailer only shows mere seconds of gameplay, so I'm happy to wait and see more before passing judgment, but from what we've seen, I gotta defer to the hashtag. I was praying for a Doom 2016 style reboot of Turok. That would have been the best case scenario. But instead, we got Turok Origins. Beggars can't be choosers. Saber Interactive do have my full trust that it will be minimally a good game, but that's not what I want. I want a good Turok game. Thanks for watching. And thanks for indulging me on this Turok journey. I usually stick to covering like old 360 games, and I'm definitely going back that route now, but obviously this series is pretty close to my heart, so I wanted to take a little detour from the usual videos. I hit 10k subscribers while in the midst of working on this Turok trilogy, which is absolutely wild. One day, maybe I'll start a Patreon and we can all have a little achievement hunting Discord community, and maybe you guys can vote on what game I cover next. I don't know, I got a lot of ideas for the future, but at this point in time, I don't feel like I upload frequently enough to feel comfortable asking for money from anyone on a monthly basis. But if you do want to support me, I did make a Ko-fi where you can tip me as little as $1. And if you put a question with your donation, I'll feature it at the end of the next video so that you can at least get some return on investment. You can ask anything you want, whether it's channel related or achievement related or just about gaming in general, or it could even be about whatever, movies or music, I don't care. Ask away. So, link in the description. I also have a Blue Sky that I have never actually promoted, so I only have like 8 followers, so follow me there if you want a little bit more incoherent rambling about old weird games in your feed. But other than that, yeah, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next one. I'm out.